Hi there, and welcome to another live episode of the Everyday History Podcast, kind of. I'm Dustin Lloyd, and I'll be writing solo tonight because Boo Boo had to work. So, today we are going to saddle up, head on out to the old west frontier of Red Dead Redemption 2. Rockstar promised us realism with this game, but how much of it is fact and how much of it is frontier fiction? Today we're going to be digging deep into everything: weapons, horses, quests, characters, law enforcement, and even them pesky Pinkertons. So let's ride. Actually, before we ride, let me just plug a couple of things. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon and drop a tip in our CashApp Tip Jar in the comment section. It keeps the horses fed and the Pinkertons off our backs. So, where should we start? Let's start with the weapons, the most iconic thing of Red Dead Redemption, right? So, we're going to start with the Cattleman revolver, which is actually based on a Colt single-action army revolver. It's iconic, and it was widespread by the 1890s, which is, of course, fitting for the time frame that the game occurred in, 1899. We also had the Winchester repeater variants. The 1894 model had just been released and was pretty popular at the time, so that fits. The Lamotte revolver was used early in the Civil War, but it could still be found during 1899. It wasn't uncommon. Same with double barrel and pump action shotguns. Absolutely period correct. Those were very common shotguns. Bows and tomahawks were used by Native Americans and hunters into the late 1800s, so that tracks as well. As far as inaccuracy, when it comes to these weapons, it's unlikely that a single outlaw would have access to such a massive arsenal. Even though there's, you have to keep your guns well maintained. In the game, they don't really jam or misfire, which was a common thing in reality in those days. Carrying multiple guns at once. Yeah, if Arthur were a real person, it wouldn't be very likely that he'd carry his entire arsenal on the back of his horse. So, I mean, you can give that a little leeway. It's a game, right? But I'd say 8 out of 10. Liberties for gameplay, but just based on the historical research, the the models were accurate. Some of the mechanics are not. So how about train and bank robberies then? Well, it was common for dynamite to be used in these robberies, especially train and or safes involved. The train schedule and payoff or the payroll cars that was targeted just like in the game. Disguises and escape planning. Outlaws like Jesse James used similar tactics to the Vanderlyn gang. Disguises, the bandanas, simple things like that, and they did pretty good for themselves, I'd say. Kinda. The inaccuracies of this particular segment. By 1899, major railroad companies had upped security with much more advanced armored cars, and they had a lot more armored cars. But yeah, in Red Dead, you've got armored cars, but more likely in real life, they'd be higher trained to deal with those pesky outlaws. So, just based on my research, it was kind of hard, but I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. You can argue with that in the comments if you'd like. Music. One of my favorite things about Red Dead when it comes to the atmosphere is the music, the bar room, saloon tunes, the fiddle players, all very spot on for, the saloon life and camp life. The music was stylized to sound period appropriate, but not all the music was, you know, a real song in that era. Some of them were, but most of them were not. Um, and this is where I kind of had to deviate from the reality of the real world and the cinematic element of the game. Songs like Unshaken and some of the other tracks are more modern and obviously don't fit, but we can give that a slide, right? But many of those songs even were meant to invoke a feeling of the West rather than being historically accurate, musical pieces. Still, probably 7 out of 10 just for that part. As far as the actual in-game music, that's I'd say 9.5 out of 10. Oh, the technology and infrastructure of the games. How did that pair up with the real world? Well, electric lights, telegraphs, phonographs, and fans all existed in 1899. The electric lights and telegraphs and stuff more likely to exist in a major city rather than a small town like Valentine, for example. Uh, Trains, trolleys, steamboats, they were widely used, so that's very accurate. Photographs and portraits were common to this era, especially with traveling photographers being a thing. So, hey, that's accurate. The inaccuracies of this particular part is there was the access to tech, like I kind of mentioned. In the game, remote areas are fairly well connected with the modern world. That's just not how it was. So, yeah, that was they took a little leeway there. Weapon stores did not carry the most exotic or high-tech weaponry or equipment. That was very unlikely outside of, major cities. So I got to subtract a point for that. So we're going to go with a 9 out of 10 because they did do an impressive amount of research to keep the timeline on track. So I respect that. So what about one of my favorite parts of the game? Gambling. Love the poker, blackjack. I'm not so big on the dominoes, but those were actually staples of saloons in the old American West. So that checks out. Drinking culture was central to saloons and frontier life. So those all check out. Prostitution, part of saloon operations in many towns. That was commonplace. And it was, it's not looked upon like it is today. Maybe snake oil and patent medicines were actually very common in the medical quackery world of the time. So those check out, except they didn't restore anything because they just didn't work. So no restoring your health or fortifying anything with snake oil because that's not going to do shit. As far as inaccuracies in these aspects, well, the saloons are a bit too clean and picturesque. They're probably not as clean and not as pretty. Gamblers in the game behave more like modern poker players. Historical rules often varied by region, so not every saloon would be playing Texas Hold'em or 5 card stud, 5 card draw, anything like that. It just varied depending on where you were at. So 8.5 because it was very accurate, but they did kind of soften some stuff. So I have to give it that. So we'll move on to towns and geography. And I know I'm moving along really fast, but without Boo Boo here, I don't really have anyone to bounce stupidity off of. So hopefully you guys are learning something and enjoying it. Um, so towns and geography. Saint Denis, based on New Orleans at the time. Valentine, based on towns like Fort Worth and Dodge City in the 1800s. Annisburg isn't based on a particular city, but it's more of a catch-all for the eastern or for the coal towns in Appalachia. Yeah, you can figure that one out. I'm not even trying. There's so many ways to pronounce Appalachia. Blackwater is similar to the Midwestern God, boom towns like Wichita, Kansas. So all of those based on or inspired by real cities at the time. So pretty accurate to how they matched up. I've actually seen some side by sides on like Saint Denis to the old New Orleans. Pretty cool to check out. Definitely look that up sometime, guys. Um, the only inaccuracy I'd really say when it comes to these, because they're not meant to be the real town they're inspired by, but the map compasses drastically different ecosystems. Like you've got the Louisiana swamps, you've got the Rockies, the Great Plains, but they encompass it all into just a few miles, and that's not how geography works. And so 9 out of 10 for aesthetic. Actually, let's go 10 out of that's 10 out of 10 for aesthetic. They nailed the architectural realism, and they did a great job on the feel. But you got to give it 5 out of 10 for the realism of the ecosystems being so close. Nah, doesn't work like that. I don't know if you guys can hear my cat, but she just jumped up on my desk. Get down. All right. Horses and ranching. Horse breeds like the American Standard Bred, the Morgan, and the Mustang were all real and relevant at the time. Saddle types, tack, grooming, all portrayed very well. Horse bonding mechanics rather, reflect real relationships between humans and horses. They did a great job on the research from everything I could find. Um, 10 out of 10. Exceptional research and realism. Are you going to make a special guest appearance? There's my cat. Say hi, Carmen. Say hi to everybody. No? Okay. Wildlife. Speaking of wildlife, most animals in the game existed in North America at the time. Bison, elk, cougars, bears, wolves were all placed in ecologically accurate locations. Hunting and skinning methods are grounded in real 19th century trapping and fur trading. Um, I guess with the exception of being, I've never seen anyone skin a deer that quickly, and I grew up in Virginia hunting, fishing, and all that. Maybe people out there know how to do it. I've never seen it done. So, 9 out of 10 though. 9.5 out of 10. We'll go that far. It was very well done. Very accurate. The drugs, alcohol, and medicine. Cocaine chewing gum, morphine syringes, opium tinctures, all real. Tonic ads and snake oil salesmen are based on actual products and traveling hucksters. Addiction references like Uncle's alcoholism and sickness references like Arthur's tuberculosis are historically grounded, um, as well as, if you remember, Reverend Swanson's morphine addiction, common affliction of the time. So 9.5 out of 10. It's dramatized, but the tone of it is real, and they did a great job of capturing all of that into the emotion of the game. Social issues, race, class, women, labor. African American characters reflected real post reconstruction struggles. There was a struggle after the Civil War as far as racial tensions, which is highlighted in the game. They did a good job of that. Women's suffrage movement is referenced in side quests and dialogues. The Native American displacement is portrayed in the Eagle Flies storyline, which is a very, very well done storyline, I felt. Class tension and labor strikes were present in Annesburg and railroad towns. Those are all accurate portrayals according to historians and from what I could research. Of course, a lot of things in the game dramatized for effect, but the spirit of it is there. And yeah, so I'm gonna sorry. The inaccurate parts of the social dynamics is the outlaw gangs wouldn't necessarily have such a diverse what's the word I'm looking for? Diverse social structure, I guess is what I'd say. Um Racial equality and Sadie Adler being allowed to join the men are idealized. That wasn't really a thing. We're looking at it through modern perspectives when we write or when we play games like that. Sorry, the cat's still trying to interrupt me. So 8 out of 10 overall. It's surprisingly nuanced, but also it's slightly modernized. We're looking at it through modern times, and still added a lot to the game. Law enforcement and the Pinkertons. Accurate parts of this are that the Pinkertons were real and operated with extreme. They could do whatever they want, I guess. Often acting as private law enforcement too. They'd be hired as basically beefed up security guards for companies, rich businessmen. Bounty systems did exist, and wanted dead or alive posters were real tools of justice of the day. Um, Lawmen sometimes operated under extra legal authority, meaning they could, like I said with the Pinkertons, kind of do what they wanted. Who are they going to answer to? You know. So 9 out of 5. Um, I'd say the biggest flaw in that is the how quick they are to identify you when you're wearing a mask. That's not very accurate. So how about another really cool feature of the game, Arthur Morgan's journal and his literacy. It's accurate that cowboys and outlaws often kept sparse journals. His drawing and commentary match 19th century frontier diaries in tone and style. If he was, and there you see her again. Hi, Carmen. A person who was able to read in that time or draw would likely draw and write in the style that Arthur did or similar to it. So I'd say 10 out of 10 because of the human touch it adds to the game to me. So overall score, I'm gonna go with an say 9 out of 10. That's my opinion. Um, so yeah, let's do a top 5 wildest true facts behind Red Dead 2, and then I'll get off of here and leave you people be. So number one, the Pinkertons really sued Rockstar in 2019 over their portrayal in the game. They didn't win, obviously. Over 25% of the outlaw number two, sorry, over 25% of outlaws and cowboys in the Old West were either black or Hispanic. And Rockstar's inclusion of Charles and Lenny reflects this thing. Number three, snake oil often contained cocaine or opium, like the items Arthur chugs mid gunfight. That's always good to have when you're, shooting it out and relying on the accuracy of your not so accurate gun. And you can see that back there. That's what's distracting me. Number four, real outlaws like Butch Cassidy wanted to unionize robbers, and that was basically Dutch's dream of a brotherhood, is a union of sorts. Number five, the tuberculosis story arc mirrors real life frontier mortality. TB was the leading cause of death in the 19th century, right next to barbers. I made the barber part up, but you could believe it for a minute, didn't you? All right. Well, with that, hey, all right, fine. With that, I'm gonna get off here. Thank you guys for joining me, and join us again in the future. We're probably gonna be doing these on Tuesdays, not this coming week, but starting the next week because Boo Boo's work schedule works out better that way, and so does mine. So, see you guys soon, and hey, have a great night.